Lisa Bullock, one of the co-chairs of Women to Women. When Robin Hager told me that Jane Pauley had accepted our invitation to speak, my first response was, oh, she was my idol. And I'm sure I'm not alone in claiming her. Jane Pauley is one of America's most beloved journalists. In the broadcast field and the real life field, her accomplishments are amazing. Let's review. Network anchor at age 22. Co-anchor of the Today Show at 25. Following Barbara Walters. Now, who would like to follow Barbara Walters at age 25? Seriously? Creator and co-host of Real Life with Jane Pauley, later known as Dateline NBC, and currently on CBS, big change, Sunday morning. Winner of multiple Emmys, author, I just finished it, activist for mental health research and reform, not to mention spouse of Doonesbury creator, cartoonist Gary Trudeau, and proud mother of 3, including a set of twins. But now I want to get personal and direct some comments to Jane. I first met you virtually in 1976 while in college. Graduation was near, the real world, and I hoped a business career. And I was entering a business world not entirely welcoming to women. There weren't life coaches, mentors, or even much career advice for women. So, as I sat in my pajamas, watching you on the Today Show, I marveled at someone barely out of college in such an important position. And I watched you every day. And I started taking notes of qualities to emulate. It was a long list, but may I share the things I distinctly remember? You always seemed prepared. I know you had a great staff, but in the end, it was all you. You were unfailingly polite and respectful to your guests and your staff. You put guests at ease, brought out the best in them, plus shared credit with your staff. You had such a positive attitude. No one, day after day, could be that chipper so early in the morning. Yet you projected that. Therefore, I'm adding great actress to your resume. But now to get really personal. Your hair. Much discussed, always envied. And in the 90s, when my mom called and said, oh, did you see Jane cut her hair? I knew it was time. It's taken 38 years, but I finally get to thank you for being my on-screen role model. Your work ethic, kindness, and humility never go out of style. Whether you're a volunteer, community volunteer, or a top executive. And now to the main event. We're going to change things up a little bit today. Jane will speak, and then she'll have a conversation with Sandra, with questions submitted by the community. Jane Pauley, we are honored to have you here today.
In 40 years, that's the best introduction I have ever. Addie, congratulations. That standing ovation, I'm accustomed to standing ovations. I had a daytime show. You probably don't remember. You remember the year Oprah gave everybody in her audience a new car? Well, that's the week the Jane Pauley show debuted. I think my audience got toothbrushes. But it was the hardest year of my life, but the best year in my career. And it often gets left out because of its being a failure and all. Sometimes I think people are self-conscious about that. But I did love it, but I got a standing ovation every day. It was rehearsed. Yours was not rehearsed. Ladies and a few gentlemen who were lucky enough to be here, and my husband once, within the last 48 hours, said that he would love to be one of the guys at an event like this. You have something really special here. I felt moved to tears more than, can you see me? Because I feel like my dress, I'm in camouflage. All right, I guess you can hear me. Not every community has what you have, and that is a real sense of community. Not just, yeah. One of your nominees, and if I didn't have the memory of an Etch-a-Sketch, I would remember her name, the literacy, the pretty blonde lady. She repeated the phrase, I see, that's what you do. You see that everybody, that your community is far broader than the people that mostly are seen. And you are writing checks today to support the people who reach out. That animated, the animation I saw, is Candy here? Candy is not here. That animation that described what you do was brilliant, and it should be shared. I know it nearly moved me to tears while telling you accurately why we're here, that in a few years, 5 years, 10 years, there will be women at this table writing checks because of some work that was done in support of some nonprofit that took their lives in a different direction, not to mention their children's lives in a whole new direction. So congratulations on your choice to be here today. I wrote a book, Your Life Calling. It's about the future. Lisa spent some time with the past. There's a lot of that. I have a lot of past because I have a birthday coming up on Halloween. But I'm future-oriented. November 15th, one of the twins is getting married. My daughter, Ricky. My son, Tommy, got married in June. He's the youngest. I'd love it if Ross met a North Carolina girl. That'd be fine. And we'd have a clean sweep. But I am future-oriented, and the book is about the reality that a woman who is 64, which will be my age on Halloween, could be starting a new job at a network, CBS, who knew? Who saw that coming? Not me. It's a different world we're living in. And someone, I guess it was Sandra, we've been talking about the fact that this is a very intergenerational group. There are young people. My message resonates because when we leave here today, through those signs marked exit, all of us, no matter whether we're 20, 30, 60, 80, are entering the future together. And so I'd like to maybe bring Sandra up, right now, so that we can get a conversation going. Someone once told me that I had a gift for closing the distance, which was something I'd never thought about before, but it was flattering. But I realized it was true, but it wasn't a gift. It's a need. So being here at a podium this is distance. So what I want to do is close the distance, Sandra, and move over to the sofa where I will no longer appear in camouflage. And we'll spend a few minutes talking about things that Sandra, who had a birthday recently too, she's also an October girl. We started our careers in 1972, the same time. Let's go over and talk about stuff.
That's good.
And you all know who Sandra is. I swear when I read your bio on the plane coming down, you know the history. I didn't. the story of your career brought tears to my eyes, and I am in awe of you, and I just treasure the fact that we did start our careers in 1972, both of us, and after you were more successful in daytime than I was, but you know, after these very divergent careers that we have, here we are together. And a belated happy birthday to you.
Thank you, and a future happy birthday to you. Although I'm much older than you are.
Not that much. I figure once we're over 50, we're all the same age.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Well,
and you know, we boomers are all over now, but the Gen Xers are starting to turn 50 too. And welcome aboard.
well, I want to say to all of you, I've had a few minutes to talk to Jane, or a little while before we came in today. And have you ever talked to someone that you just immediately connect with? Just immediately. Well, that's what I did with her, so she can never get out of my life now. She's in it whether she wants to be or not.
That's fine with me.
And when I read her book, I thought, gosh, I could just erase her name and put my name on this, because so much of what you said and talked about sounded an awful lot like some of the things that I went through. We are fortunate that we gave our community, many of you and people from our viewing audience, to ask questions, write down the questions that you wanted, and I have some of those here that I'm going to ask. If something starts burning in your soul while you're sitting here, find Lynn, raise your hand, Lynn, and tell him, and he'll come up and whisper to me, and I'll
Lynn,
ask
are you
him.
a doctor? Is something burning in their soul?
That's true, that's true. Well, first of all, everyone is excited about you being here, and we welcome you to Greensboro and to this event particularly.
Well, it's a thrill, and I took about a millisecond to say yes.
Yes. All right, the first question that I really liked, it says, did you have a mentor, or do you have one now? And what was the best advice that mentor gave you?
I never really had a mentor. And I know my generation, we were all supposed to have mentors. If I had a role model, it was probably Mary Tyler Moore. I know you got to be old enough to get that. I owe my career to the fact that, like you, I started my career at a CBS affiliate in Indianapolis, and as a general assignment reporter with no experience and no degree in journalism, but I was worth $100 a week. So, but after a while, I was the weekend anchor of the big news in Indianapolis on a CBS affiliate, which meant I followed All in the Family, MASH, Mary Tyler Moore, Bob Newhart. Oprah says she put the conditioner on her hair during Newhart.
That's right.
And Carol Burnett, so that I had a tsunami of viewers for my weekend show. And during the weekend of the Indianapolis 500, when the population of my hometown swells by at least 500,000 people, I just knew if anybody from out of town is watching television tonight, they're watching me. And with that, a week later, I got a phone call from Chicago. A man, Ed Planer, said, Miss Pauley, I'm sorry I don't know your first name, but I hear you're pretty good. It was someone who had been in town for the race. And so, you know, Mary Tyler Moore was part of that CBS tsunami. She worked at a local television station, the character did. And we did not have women on television who were as common as you were. I sometimes am called a pioneer. I was not. Barbara Walters was a pioneer. Marlene Sanders was a pioneer. But you, my dear, were a pioneer.
Well, you know, thank you. But there were plenty of...
Did I answer your question? I can't even remember what
we wanted to know who your mentor is.
Right.
No, there were plenty of people before me, but I just had an interesting ride, and I still have lots of people here that I can count on, and that's great. All right, What advice do you have for especially the younger members of our audience who might be looking for a mentor?
There was a part B of that original question that I wanted to answer that is kind of what you just said. The best advice. Best advice I ever got was in my inbox one morning, an email, and this was maybe 3 years after my daytime show was off the air. And people had stopped asking, "What are you doing these days, Jane?" and started asking how I was enjoying retirement, which was not my goal. So this email began, "Dear Mom." It was from my youngest son, Tom, and Tommy was worried about his mother. I don't think Tom fully appreciated that every day on the sofa where he would see me, which is my comfort zone, specific spot on my sofa in my living room, that I probably was shrinking into my comfort zone, but I actually was working the problem. But I was overworking the problem. In my book, there's a chapter that explains why, and I didn't make this up, do is more important than think. I was overthinking the problem. Dear Mom, if I could summarize, I think you've surveyed the field long enough, thinking about what you might want to do or what you might be good at, what your options are. It's time for you to make something happen. Make your move. It wasn't that was a life-changing moment. I didn't say, by gosh, I'm gonna. But it was extraordinarily good advice. For anyone here of any age, do is more important than think. Think is really important. I mean, you don't want to have an idea that is so unrealistic, you will be disappointed. But failure is overrated. I think as a mother, one of the best things I ever did was have a daytime show that was unsuccessful. When I said yes to that opportunity, which I had never thought about, because I thought I was leaving Dateline. I literally was out the door, and they had this farewell testimonial on Dateline for me. Jane Pauley signs off. And people, including Barbara Walters, called to ask why anybody would voluntarily leave a daytime show. But I had this intuition that I think a lot of you may share, that there was more for me, but I didn't know what it was. But until that camera got out of the way, I wouldn't know what was behind it. So I was actually leaving a primetime television show without knowing where I was going, because I was responding to this sense that there was something more. And all the publicity I got made me too important for NBC to let me go, and they offered me a daytime show. So I tell my children, they'd heard of Oprah. I said, kind of long odds here, but my definition of success is having the courage to try, to say yes. And then when I did and failed, my children, who frankly had seen, because you don't tell your children you've had a bad week, the ratings were terrible, your replacement has been named in the newspaper, you don't, and in my resume, I don't put the bad parts, we only put the good stuff.
That's right.
So my children saw what looked like a straight line up until the Jane Pauley show was canceled. Demonstrating that you can rebound from failure was the most important thing I demonstrated for those kids. And it also gave me a chance to sit on the sofa for a while, to think a while about what I wanted to do, what I thought I would be good at, and then, by gosh, to go do it. Your Life Calling, a segment I did on the Today Show for 4 seasons with AARP paying for it, but it was my idea, informed the stories in the book, Your Life Calling. And it was that book that indirectly got me on CBS Sunday Morning which was an outcome I did not. I think when I accepted this invitation, I didn't know that was going to happen.
But it's wonderful.
It is it's a terrific show.
Yes.
But it just goes to tell you that everybody here knows someone who lived to be in their 90s, robust, good health in their 90s, or maybe even longer. Maybe there are people here who are in their 90s. But our parents and grandparents probably didn't, much less think that they could have productive years ahead of them. And there is so much productivity. LaToya, God bless you. My mother tells people, bragging, my daughter is a professional volunteer. There isn't anybody here, I don't care if you've got a career or don't have a career or have never had a career, who couldn't, as of today, become a professional volunteer. I was not one. I sit on a few boards and I lend my name. I do things, but in an emergency, I'm not the one you call. But in my book, I noticed a theme that I wasn't looking for it. It was after the fact that people who'd had a history of being volunteers seem to have more options. Mm-hmm. They seem to have more competencies. They seem to have more confidence. And in fact, my friend Katie showed me something from the newspaper that there's empirical research that shows people who volunteered in their 30s develop a kind of muscle memory where volunteering becomes just natural. So for a young person, going back to a question I think you asked before, my advice is, even if you don't have an idea about your career or the job market isn't favoring you at the moment, go volunteer. It's good networking, it develops confidence, it develops competencies, and you're helping people, and you may discover that you want to become a professional volunteer. And that applies to everyone here in the audience. A story in my book, a woman who is not retired, she's a college professor, Guggenheim Fellow, former Rhodes Scholar, brilliant. 20 IQ points on me, easy. Not retired, but when her daughter left for college, she had time on her hands, and she filled it by training her dog to become a therapy dog. And 2 hours a week, they go to a nursing home and volunteer. Sue Halpern says that she has found research that shows volunteering makes you feel richer, literally, as if you had more money in your pocket. And it increases your life expectancy. So if you have another check in your pocketbook and you're now thinking, that check I wrote and put in the purse wasn't as big as I really could have afforded, now might be a good time to write a second check.
Today.
Yes. We'll pause and give you money.
And wave your check if you have
because you will feel richer.
Another question from our community is, how can young women today deal with maybe some of the career bias you and I dealt with back in the 70s? Is it still there?
Well, of course it's still there, but do is more important than think. Think less about the bias and more about the doing. If you wait for the world to be fair to you, you're going to be a real old lady. You didn't wait for the world to be fair to you.
No.
And the only reason Sandra is still sitting here with a future she's still thinking about is because she didn't let that very real, very scary bias that you faced daunt her. So do is far more important than thinking about what the odds are against you. I think looking back on my own life, I'm kind of a timid person. I'm not very, ambition, you wouldn't call me an ambitious person. Every big job I ever had was like that phone call from Chicago. It came and found me. I didn't think, Barbara Walters leaving, I'm available. No. I sat in Barbara Walters' chair at 25 when I was 1 year from anchoring the big news on Saturday night in Indianapolis. Did I think of that? No. You know, so I'm not an ambitious person. But what I do have, and it's one of the reasons you can aspire to be a 60-something woman, is you recognize your strengths. You are more likely to use them on offense and not defense, which women more likely have done. You're more likely to think that, that volunteering isn't just something you give away, it's something that you do and that you're good at. You stop apologizing for stuff. One of those stories I tell was a woman who said she started a terrific nonprofit in Philadelphia called Fresh Artists I'd like you to read about. But she says, you know, Jane, I've always been a pretty confident person, but in my 60s, it's reached terrifying proportions. And I could kind of identify with that. Though, you know, in my 20s, 30s, 40s, I had, you know, success in abundance, but not ambition or confidence in abundance. But in hindsight, I can look back and see that I had a character trait. When given an opportunity, and I think I was always sort of available to it. Like, I mean, the idea that someone might be in town this weekend, I mean, I was available to opportunity. When it crossed my, this is opportunity crossing my field of vision, in case you're wondering what that gesture was. I said yes. I had a history, and at the end of my book, and that's my goal, didn't see the CBS thing coming. Charlie Osgood is 82, so it's CBS Sunday morning. Being mature is fine. So it could be a long story, but I've got a longer life ahead of me, and my personal goal, you'll have different ones, but my personal goal, and this will be a stretch for me, this will require discipline because of that comfort zone thing I was telling you about, is to be someone who tries.
Or who never stops trying, no matter what.
Yes, and I'm not afraid of failure. Been there, done that.
Well, you know, I wanted to say that in 1972, I was in my 20s. And when you're young, things don't scare you like they do when you get older.
Oh, I'm much less scared than I was. Everything scared me in my 20s.
Well, I wasn't afraid. But now that I'm in my 60s, I'm scared to death of everything.
Well, we kind of cover the spectrum, don't we?
That's right.
I'm so glad we've had this chat.
Yeah. That's true. Okay.
You know, I call it talk therapy.
It is.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm unqualified, but my advice is free.
Well, we've had a good time doing this since she arrived. I can tell you that. Okay.
Well, you know why this is good?
What's this?
We've got two messages that apply to everybody in this room because there are thought bubbles all over your head, and we can see them. So some of you are rip-roaring with confidence, and some of you are squishy-tummied thinking, you know, that's not about, they're not talking about me, I'm scared of everything. So we've kind of demonstrated the spectrum of how you are entitled to feel.
Exactly. Lynn just handed me a note from someone in the audience, and they said, no, I thought that's what he was coming for, but he didn't. He didn't say it yet. It says, how do you like working with Charlie Rose, who is our North Carolina native?
Yes, and it comes up all the time. Yes, he is, and I'm a Hoosier, and that comes up a lot too. But Charlie. Actually, I don't know if you know this, but they were identical triplets, which is actually biologically impossible. That's a joke. Charlie, I once teased him about don't give up your day jobs. I've never met anybody other than Tom Brokaw, who at NBC was known as Duncan the Wonder Horse. Charlie is... I mean, when does he stop?
He doesn't.
When does he stop? And then on the escalator coming down at the airport last night, who did I see at the bottom of the escalator on a TV screen. But Tom Brokaw, who's coming to speak, you don't know this because you weren't at the airport. He's at the commencement speaker at High Point University next spring.
Okay, very
so
good.
So Tom and Charlie, I mean, I don't know what they're on, but I had some.
Let's get whatever it is.
Yeah. So Tom's from South Dakota, if anybody knows anybody from there.
Here's another question from our audience. It says, do you think the morning shows today are a lot different than when you started?
They're so fast. Oh my gosh. When I started the Today Show in the city that never sleeps, that city was pretty sleepy. New York City was pretty quiet when I would come to work in the morning. The crew turned the camera on, started an interview. The crew was asleep. We would do interviews that were 7, 8, 9, sometimes minutes long.
Wow.
There were sometimes poets or chamber music. And today, segments don't run really much longer than 3 minutes.
No.
I talk about the Today Show. When I went back, because I was anchored the Today Show for 13 years when I was much younger. So going back with my Your Life Calling series for 4 years, it was like riding a bicycle on the interstate during rush hour. I mean, it was so different. Though, I'll have to say, the CBS this morning, Real News is back in the morning.
It is.
Is kind of different. And Charlie, he's funny. Though we'll get a cue in our ear, wrap it up, because a half hour is only this long, and this segment. So Charlie just blows right through it. If he's got something else he wants to ask and something else after that, he will.
Do many of you remember Lee Kynert that I worked with? Lee Kynert would direct the morning show from the set. I don't care what they were saying in his ear. We need to go to break, and he says, not now. Right now we're going to do this. And they, and the producers and directors would go crazy, and they would say, motion him, come on, sit on this sofa. And he said, no, I think I'm going to sit in that chair over there.
But that's what you love about morning television it was forgivable. My hair, I mean, you could, Jane's bad hair. Did you know that I coined, and I'm serious, prove me wrong, I coined the phrase bad hair day?
No.
I honestly, I believe that I did. And I do have some evidence on videotape to show for it. But morning television, there's an intimacy, a relationship that is, that's not changed.
No.
I think people still feel that way.
It's still a family situation.
Yeah.
All right, the next question is, how do you describe the level of gender equality in news today? Men versus women.
Women are far more likely to be in senior executive positions. They were never in senior executive positions. Now they often are. Women hosts, whether it was Katie Couric or Diane Sawyer, Robin Roberts, really are the host of the shows. That's new. And when Barbara Walters was on the Today Show, she was still the Barbara Walters except that contractually, she had to wait for Frank McGee to ask 2 questions before she could ask 1. Things have changed a whole lot, and it's important because as you and I, whether we realized it or not, as Lisa described so sweetly before, we were role models for women, younger, middle-aged, and now older, who are identifying with our struggles. And I've had struggles. I mean, I've had a major health issue that I came from a family that we had cancer, and I mean, there were an automobile accident in the family history, but there was no mental illness. I mean, we were Midwestern. So at the age of 50, I don't know if many of you know, but I'm sure some of you do, it was a medical, it's a complicated story to tell, but I was bipolar. I was diagnosed with bipolar, and I am, as we speak, a person who takes medication every day, and I haven't had another episode in 14 years, though I have to take care of myself. Mm-hmm. So when I talk about confidence in the future, Jane Pauley is not a Pollyanna. That's my sister Anne. So I know that life happens, and you know, we aren't all dealt the lucky card. But in general, my generation was the first to get a heads up that we were the luckiest generation. We're not even the biggest generation anymore. The millennials are bigger than the boomers. But the boomers were the first generation to get a heads up that exit sign means something different. The exit sign used to be a metaphor for retirement. You know, you had a career, they gave you your gold watch, you walked through the exit sign, and that was it. Now retirement, as a friend of mine put it, is more like a revolving door that moves a person from something to something else. And just because of the nature of the event, I will return to a theme. My book is not about volunteering, but volunteering is a really good thing to be doing in that revolving door. If the bubble over your head is still, I too, Jane, believe there's something more for me, but I haven't a clue what it is.
And I've been asking you about a hobby, but you weren't ready to talk about it.
I asked you, I said, please ask me. I wrote a chapter in my book about my hobbies, of which there are none. And so the wisdom about, for young, middle-aged or older, about, you know, just follow your bliss or just follow your passion. Does a person without hobbies have passions? I don't think so. So that wisdom didn't do much for me. I come from a family with hobbies. My sister is taking a class in photography, or she's taking piano, or I don't know. She built a harpsichord from a kit. She had a loom the size of a small car in her bedroom, a loom. And me, you know, I watercolor. I tried that and showed Gary a picture of one of my watercolors. It never got better after 45 minutes, but I was very proud of this one. And my husband is a cartoonist, but he majored in fine arts in college. So he's looking at this watercolor, and his wife, like a 4-year-old, you know, is waiting for compliments. And he takes a painfully long time to think of something nice to say. And finally he says, and I think this may be appropriate to where we are in this conversation, well, you know when to stop. Unless you don't want to, we don't have to.
No, let's not stop just yet.
Yeah. Okay. Well, but I have a coda to that story.
Okay.
I have a short coda. So in the book, the chapter about hobbies, there's a joke about me knitting, and people always asking knitters, what are you making? Mm-hmm. And I say rose. Knit, purl, knit, purl. Okay. All right. But I'm on book tour, and I'm talking about your life calling and these amazing stories that we did 37 stories in the course of the series, and a lot of them, if it wasn't volunteering, they were people who had robust hobbies or passions, and I obviously was someone without hobbies and would not have been able to fill in the blank for passion. On book tour, I heard a woman speaking with passion, and she was me. Oh. And I realized that telling stories to purpose for a reason. Finding out your story and sharing it with the audience. Or telling the stories about people I've met and sharing them with you because maybe one or another story will resonate in some way with you, was something that I was passionate about. And frankly, it kind of caught me by surprise. I literally, it was like an out-of-body experience. I heard a woman speaking with passion and realized, that's you. So it's not a hobby, but I do have a passion.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much.
It's very, very good. Thank you. I am your dog.